This is how you come down. Alright. Doing this from inside. Enough of that battling outside with all the noise and shit. Now, what day is it? I don't know what day it is or how long we've been gone. But I will share with you I suggest to everybody I know to jump out of your bubble. Somehow get away from your daily routine. Get out and ground your feet out. Try to relax. Do something different. Do something healthy. And you look back in on your routine, your current life, and you figure out what you need to work on, where you've been screwing up, where you might not be screwing up, where you're doing well, whatever. You just take a look in from the outside. It helps me. And where I'm at right now is I don't feel panicked, but I feel my drive to travel south and get some direct answers has really increased. That's the only thing that I've noticed so far is I have not a panicked feeling, but a feeling of I don't even know what the word is, not quite an urgency or a panic, but it's my drive to go look into the eyes with and speak to individuals who are in contact with these people. I've got a natural urge to go get this done. That's where I'm at so far as I'm sitting outside of my bubble and looking in. Thought I'd share that with everybody. Now, yesterday we heard from a Marine, ex-veteran, who shared with us his experience hunting, something paralleling him in the forest. And he mentioned that he had emailed us earlier. So I did a search in his name, and I come up with a long email here, and it was actually in a folder, whatever. He sent it in a different format, but I've got it. And I'm not sure if I read it or not. I have a feeling we may not have, but I'm going to share it right now. So, the title of this email, which he sent previous, was Sasquatch on a Marine Corps base, also a bad BO experience when later I tried to report it. Now listen to this. I'll put some kind of B-roll behind here with this audio. I know this is a long explanation, but I'd like to expound on my experience that I had reported to you earlier. Oh, holy cow, there's another one even earlier than this. So as to better describe what happened in greater detail, and to warn people that Sasquatch are not fun and cuddly forest creatures. They can be very dangerous. I briefly talked about this in an earlier email to you, Steve, that you had posted on a video earlier. If you want to share, fine. But if not, that's also okay. I just wanted to explain what had happened, so maybe others will be warned of dangers when facing a Sasquatch. My name is Dennis Copeland. I'm a former Marine with over 6 years of active duty and live in Oregon now. I'd like to share my experience with Sasquatch that I had on a Marine Corps base camp Lejeune, North Carolina, which we've heard a lot of that base in the past. Should you want to share my experience, feel free to use my name, as I am retired and old enough now that I really don't care what people think. I know that Bigfoot or Sasquatch are real, not an ape or a gorilla, and they can be very dangerous. I had my first encounter with Sasquatch during a fishing trip. This happened on a weekend during the spring on a Marine Corps base in North Carolina. There are 5 of us, all Marines, with all of us being Vietnam veterans and some of us having served multiple tours in Vietnam. What made this encounter difficult to understand is that it did not seem to bother the Sasquatches. That we in a group, and that this was in the middle of the day and not at night, but broad daylight. And before I begin, I'd like to say that I truly feel that these Sasquatches were actually hunting us, trying to get one or more of us to run towards unseen and unknown Sasquatches hiding behind us. There were at least 2 of them, silently waiting for us to run in the opposite direction of the 2 Sasquatches that were trying to herd us to the ones that were waiting in hiding. Okay, this is sounding familiar. I've told only a few others about this encounter I had earlier in my life, but I was always met with the typical laughter and accusations of, quote, I must be kidding them, or that I was mistaken in what truly happened, as well as what I saw, end quote. I know what I saw and what happened, and I, for one, wish more people were aware of the danger that they put themselves in when they go out in nature's playground, so that when they go prepared, as well as pay more attention to their surroundings. I sincerely hope that you will continue to bring the encounters that people have had with these things to the people that have no idea what is actually out there. And while, yes, there may be some friendly, happy occurrences, ours was neither happy nor friendly. Growing up as an avid outdoors person and hunter with many times spending nights in the woods alone in the Northwest, I was not a believer in Sasquatch. I, of course, had heard stories of Bigfoot and thought that they were just stories or myths. The first time I knew these things were real was while I was a Marine stationed at Marine Corps Base, Camp Lejeune, North Carolina. I was on active duty and I had spent 2.5 tours in Vietnam. My 3rd trip was cut short due to being wounded. I had never in my time that I was in Vietnam been so scared as I was when I first experienced these things. Bigfoot is real, very smart, cunning, and can be dangerous. At the very least intimidating. It was early spring and fishing in North Carolina is incredibly good at this time of year. There were 4 other Marines that I knew, all Vietnam veterans, with several of them, like me, that had served more than 1 tour in Vietnam, deep in the shit, so to say, that we were not easily intimidated, would be putting it mildly. We had decided to go fishing on what was then the backside of Camp Lejeune. This location is now, as it was then, a part of a Marine air base. It was a spot that we had fished several times before and never had anything but a great time catching fish and just enjoying the outdoors. There was a railroad line that delivered supplies to the base on the southwest side of the base. We would park our cars off the main road and walk back about a mile on this rail line to a railroad bridge that went across a small river that was no more than about 100 feet wide. In the middle, the bridge went over a small island. We had all fished at this location several times in the past and had done very well in catching bass, catfish, and other types of fish off the railroad bridge or small island in the middle of the river. This location is only a couple of miles from the Atlantic coast of North Carolina. It is very swampy and tall brush and grass that is mostly marsh and swamp, as well as small trees, although there are a few large trees standing on the banks on both sides of the river. There was a lot of brush and tall grass that was on the banks of the river. The brush was so thick that you could not see more than about a few feet into the brush and grass, and it was an average about 10 to 12 feet high. On this afternoon while fishing, we were all having a great time and catching a lot of fish when we noticed that everything got very quiet. This is something that was not normal, as there were always birds and other animals making noise. It was getting late in the afternoon, not sunset, but getting close. Downriver from us on the left side of the river, a large branch flew out into the river about 30 feet from the bank. As there were no large trees near where this branch had landed, they were big enough that the branch could have fallen from. The only explanation was that it had been thrown into the river by someone because it could not have fallen from a tree. We had all commented on how, had that large branch, what looked like it had to be about 8 inches around at the largest end and about 12 feet long, ended up in the river, when it was not possible that had come from any nearby trees, and certainly too big to be thrown by any of us that far into the river, and there was little or no wind that could have been responsible, and that made us wonder what in the world could have thrown that branch into the river. Whatever it was had to be very big and strong. It was then that we heard something large that started moving through the brush that lined the bank on the river, back in the brush near where the branch had come from. It had to be exceptionally large from the sounds it was making. The underbrush and small trees on the bank had to be about 10 to 12 feet tall and very thick. So thick, we could not see more than a few feet into the brush and trees that lined the bank where we heard the sounds that this thing was making. It sounded to be walking on 2 feet and was moving slow at first, and then it began to run. Whatever it was, it had to be very large, as it was breaking small trees and brush as it moved. We could see the taller trees move above where it was, and could hear them break by the sounds and fall as it walked. At first slow, and then very fast as it approached the train tracks on our left side. No man could have walked through that brush because of it being so thick, let alone break the trees because of the size they were that lined the banks on either side of the river. It was obvious that this could not have been a man or men, as we know that there is no way we could have walked, let alone run through that stuff. Having experienced some bad bush and gnom, I knew this shit would be impossible to walk or run through for me. I'd also like to mention that there were a lot of snakes in this low swampy area. Cottonmouth, rattlesnakes, and copperhead, to name just a few that you would have to worry about. So many that you would have to be a fool to try to move through that area. We never failed to see several snakes, either on the banks that line the river or in the water, each trip there. Please note that we had also seen alligators, too, on several previous trips. This thing would run towards the tracks, and then the creature would stop short of coming out of the brush, never exposing itself near the train tracks, and would run back towards a large tree that looked to be about 4 feet wide, that had a fork in the middle of about 8 feet off the ground, that was about 75 feet downriver on our left and close to the bank on the river. Then this creature would repeat the charge towards the train tracks again, only to stop short of coming out of the brush. And as I said, all of us were combat veterans and had seen some rough times in Vietnam, but I assure you, we all were more than a little worried. One of the men said maybe it was a bear. Me, being an avid outdoors person, spending most of my early life in the woods hunting for bear, deer, or other animals, knew this was no bear. I had seen and heard a lot of bears, and no bear I had ever heard or seen walked, let alone ran through the brush on 2 feet. You might see one stand on 2 feet for a short while, or even walk a short distance on 2 feet, but not through brush, and certainly not running through brush. I told the others that there was no way that was a bear. It was just after this that it proved it was not a bear, because it let out a yell or a scream that was so loud that you not only heard it, you could feel it in your chest, as though your chest was vibrating. This scream was like nothing I've ever heard, and was certainly not any bear, cougar, bobcat, for that matter, anything I had ever heard before or since. One of the men picked up a large rock laying on the railroad track bed and chucked it at the tree, which was no more than about 75 feet away. That the sound this thing made seemed to be coming from or near this location. This caused the creature to let out another yell. It was even louder than the first yell, but sounded different from the earlier yell. It was at this time we heard a response from downstream on the right bank or opposite side of the river, which happened to be in the direction of our route back to the cars on the train tracks. It was at this time that both creatures, one at a time, repeated the running towards the tracks like the first creature had been doing before, only to stop short of coming out where we could see them, and then return to about where they started the charges. They seemed to be taking turns, running towards the train tracks. Some of the other men began to pick up the largest rocks they could find and chuck them at where they thought the creatures were in the brush. As I said before, the brush was so thick, you really could not see where the creatures were, only from the sounds they were making, running as well as movement from the brush tops when they yelled. Running as well as the movement of the brush tops, and when they yelled, could you guess where they were in the brush? I told the others that throwing rocks was no good, from the size of that creature's from the size that the creatures had to be, and sounds of the creatures, that it would take more than a rock to stop them if they really wanted to come and get us. I was also worried they would get pissed off and come out onto the train tracks to get us if the others continued to throw rocks at them. I told the others that the best thing we could do was to stay on the island in the middle of the river. At least it would give us a little time to prepare should they actually come onto the tracks to get us. This bluff attack, or what appeared to be a bluff attack of theirs, continued for what seemed like about 15 minutes, with intermittent yells or screams coming from both sides of the river. It was near the end of this time when the one on the left bank that was near the large tree with the fork in it, that we saw what it was. It had to be over 8 feet tall and over 4 feet wide at the shoulders. Its head raised above the tree in the fork of the large tree. It was a rusty red colored head covered with hair and what appeared to be a flat-like face that was not covered in hair near the eyes, nose, and mouth, but everywhere else was covered in hair, ranging from what seemed the crown of its head down on both sides of its face to below the chin. We could not see more than this, as the tree covered all but the head and shoulders. As I mentioned before, the tree is about 4 feet wide at this point, and about 4 inches to 6 inches of its shoulders stuck out on each side of the tree. It was truly massive. It was only about 75 feet away, and clear enough to make out that it was not a bear, not an ape, or gorilla, but what appeared to be an almost human face, with the exception of the head shape, flat nose, and thin but wide mouth shape, and hair that covered everything else. It was clearly too large to be human. So what it really was had to be a Sasquatch, a Bigfoot, or whatever you want to call it. But I can honestly say that it was not an ape or a gorilla. After about 15 minutes of these charges to the train tracks, their first one on the left bank of the river let out one more scream or yell that sounded different than the screams that they had been using earlier. And both creatures, the one on the left and the one on the right bank on the river, tore off into the brush going downstream away from us. It was then that we heard 2 more of these creatures, which we did not even know about them being there before this, tore out of there on our back, right, and left bank of the river going upriver from us. In all, there had to be at least 4 or more of these beings. What they had planned to do or why, I will never know. Maybe they were having fun with scaring the living shit out of us. If that was what they were doing, then I have to say that they succeeded. In all this, I must admit that I was amazed that this was happening in the light of day and not at night. Maybe they were desperate, or maybe they knew we were not armed with weapons, but for a broad daylight attack or intimidation, I would have, in all my life, never dreamed something like this could happen. As I said earlier, I was an avid hunter, and I used dogs to hunt rabbits as well as bear. I had both beagles and blue-tick hounds. And it came to me later that maybe the 2 Sasquatches downstream of us had been trying to get us to run in the opposite direction of the ones that were making all the noise, to where the 2 others that were being quiet behind us and hiding. It was more like dogs chasing the prey to the hunters. It was just a thought that I had, but one that terrified me when I thought of it later. After about a half an hour of not hearing them anymore, we all got our stuff together and got the hell out of there. We had to walk about a mile on the railroad tracks back to our cars, and we were very worried that they may double back on us. I have to say that it was the longest mile that I have ever walked. And I forgot to say that the only weapons that we had on us were some fillet knives, and that didn't give any of us comfort. I was sure wishing I had a rifle or a pistol on me, but we made it out of there with no more interaction from these things, and for me, it was the last time I ever went back to this spot to fish. No doubt. Once we were back to the cars, we all agreed not to say anything about this to anyone, worried about what it would do to our careers in the service if we were to talk about what we had experienced. We figured that the Marine Corps would kick us out for being crazy on drugs, which I, for one, never used, or they would think that we were all making up a big story. And one thing we all knew It would not be good for a career Marine to go talking about this, and as far as I know, all of us kept this encounter to ourselves. It was the last time I saw 3 of the other Marines that I had been fishing with that day, and the other one was my neighbor. We saw one another from time to time, but for some reason, we never spoke of what happened when we saw one another after that. It was funny, but on the way out of there, we were all silent, just watching the sides of the railroad track and back trail. I only mention this encounter we had a couple of times after getting out of the Marines to a couple of friends, and with the reaction that I received, I kept this to myself, except once when I tried to get this off my chest and say something to an investigator a few years ago from the B blank blank O. That's how it was typed out. When I got to the part that what I saw was not an ape, I was promptly told that what we had seen had to be an ape. I then explained that what I saw had a human-like face. The investigator was adamant that I had not seen it well enough or that I was mistaken, and that is when I hung up the damn phone on him, as I known for goddamn sure it was not an ape. I could tell that it did no good to argue about it. I learned a long time ago that you cannot argue with an idiot or someone trying to make you say something they want to hear, not what you actually saw. Yeah, let me interject. Those guys can go ram it up their asses. Cat's out of the bag, you douchebags. Every one of you lying pricks. Back to the story. Sometimes I just got to speak my mind, you know? By the way, I was a Marine Corps sniper serving in enforced recon. For this investigator to tell me that I must have been mistaken in what I had seen at no more than 75 feet was just bullshit. The one thing that they teach you in becoming a sniper beyond shooting a rifle is that you must be able to be extremely accurate and articulate in what you see. Your life depends on being very observant and to know and be able to describe accurately what you saw. It can mean the difference in your life or death, and being observant is just as or more important than shooting. To me, these things had to be Bigfoot, Sasquatch, or whatever you want to call them. And I, for one, know that this was and is something I never wanted to see again. Unfortunately, after I got out of the Marines and went back to Washington State, where I was born, I had another experience, which was a little less intimidating, but nonetheless an experience that I could have done without. I now live in Oregon, near Mount Hood, and although I have heard that there are a lot of encounters by people in this area with Bigfoot, I've been fortunate enough to have not seen any more of these things. For those who go out at night and try to call one or more of these things in, I have but one thing to say. Be careful what you ask for, you just might get it. And I, for one, think that things would or could have turned out extremely bad for us had anyone or all of us tried to run. To me, I will always think that that is exactly what they wanted. Please feel free to use my name. I'm too old to care what people think, and I know what I saw. Dennis J. Copeland, Sr. There you go. Dennis, you're one of our superheroes, man. I read this before, and I definitely don't mind sharing it again. It's a very important, detailed email to share, and it shares some points that everybody needs to know about. One being, especially, is reporting these experiences to those lying pricks gets you nowhere. It gets somebody somewhere, but it's none of us. Why? Dunno. Do I care? Not really. So there you go. There you go. Take from what you will or leave it. Do I think they were possibly being coerced into an ambush myself? Nope. I think they're just being messed with for kicks myself. If one of these people, these beings, wants any one of our asses, they're just going to go grab it. Period. It doesn't matter what time of day it is. So if they don't just come and grab your ass, then I guess they're just messing with you, right? Especially unarmed to boot. Crazy. Here's another one. This is titled Very Close Encounter. And this is sent in January 2020. Sent or saved. Anyway. Steve, thank you for what you're doing, as there are many people out there who are searching for answers. The story I'm about to tell absolutely happened. It has haunted me almost daily ever since. I'm a 51-year-old police sergeant, having been in law enforcement for 25 years. Prior to police work, I spent 4 years in the U.S. Army Infantry, having served in the mountains and jungles of Central America during the 80s. I fought in the invasion of Panama, and I spent 13 months in Fallujah during the Iraq War. I'm very experienced with weapons and tactics, but none of that was any help to me during my encounter with this creature. Not many things frightened me, but what I saw in the forest of Vermont in the summer of 2011 scared the shit out of me. A good friend of mine owns a cabin on a ridge in the northeast kingdom of Vermont, where I spent a lot of time over the years snowmobiling and riding quads. On many occasions, I've been in close proximity to moose, black bear, and deer. I'm very familiar with the different creatures in the forest, and what I saw that morning was like nothing I have ever seen before. And what I'm about to describe is difficult for me to put into words, as I have no rational explanation as to what happened. One morning before sunrise, when the landscape outside is gray and the shadows are dark, I leaned over the bed and pulled back the curtain of a window so I'd be able to tell what time it was by the amount of daylight. As soon as I pulled back the curtain, I was face to face with what I immediately knew and recognized to be a very large, dark-colored Sasquatch. In my head, I said to myself, "Holy shit, it's a Bigfoot." This Bigfoot was standing 2 feet in front of me, and it was massive. It had a very large head sitting on very large shoulders. It had no neck. For some reason, I was unable to maintain eye contact with this thing, and my visual focus was somehow diverted away from its face. I found myself staring at its right shoulder and the 2-inch gap between the creature's shoulder and the windowsill. I almost immediately began to get a very strange feeling in my head. It was a feeling as though I was inside myself, like I was inside my own head, and I was screaming in terror, like no fear I've ever felt before. At the same time, on the side of my head and neck that was closest to the creature, I felt a type of warm/tingling sensation. I've tried to come up with a better way to describe how it felt. Almost like it was electrical in nature. I remember thinking that this thing is putting me down, forcing my head down and away from it, and I had no ability to stop what was happening. I had a loaded Colt 45 auto within arm's reach where I was, and it never entered my mind to reach for it. I was completely at this thing's mercy. After briefly feeling the electrical sensation on the side of my head, I can remember nothing else. Nothing. Oh, sorry. So let me read that one more time. After briefly feeling the electrical sensation on the side of my head, I can remember nothing else. The next thing I know, the sun is up, it's daylight out, and the creature is gone. Afterward, I went outside and measured the height and width of the creature in relation to the size of the window of the cabin. And the creature was over 8 foot, 3 inches tall, and the width at the shoulders was close to 4 feet. There were no tracks to be found. I've since sold my snowmobile and I stopped going to the mountains. I would advise anyone who spends time in the forest to never go alone, never leave each other's sight, and always be armed. If you are in their environment and if these creatures want to take you, I believe they can at will. I know my experience sounds crazy, but I will swear that it happened as I described, and I would testify to it if necessary. Bill Sprague. There you go, Bill. I wouldn't question you for a half of a second. And there you go. Another innocent man enters the club of no return, didn't ask to join it. And how many douchebag investigators would change his story or not publish it or tell him to shut up, right? And why would they do that? Why? Right? There's a question. I'm feeling myself a little aggro towards the people who insist on covering the truth from the people. It gets under my skin, right? Pisses me off. What do we got next? Who do we got next? All right, here's another one. And this is titled, One of My Encounters. Hi, Steve. I know you have thousands of emails, and I'm sure some accounts of Bigfoot that you get are really dramatic. Mine is not that dramatic in that it's traumatic, but it's disturbing in the regard that I've only had 4 other encounters through the years, but none were visual until now. The 4 encounters were in Oregon, in a national forest, in California in Sequoia National Park, in Colorado by Trinidad on property off of the grid, and in Colorado in Debecue Canyon with a creature hitting our giant RV. It hit it 2 nights in a row, and a footprint was found on the ridge above us. These creatures made me curious and trying to understand what they are, so I got involved in studying the subject. I started to read and listen to accounts I had heard about in January 2019. One of the persons who I read the material was Scott Carpenter. I heard how he said they followed him home after his first encounter. I now agree with him. These creatures had to follow me home. I'm thinking maybe they can track your scent since bloodhounds can. It's not out of the realm of possibility. Otherwise, why is it I have 3 of these creatures here in Colorado that were not visual, and then suddenly one shows up in my backyard in December? It's either a crazy coincidence or Carpenter is accurate. They can and do follow some folks home. I'm giving you the narrative here. You can read it and do what you like. I don't care anymore if my full name is connected to it. I'm a retired teacher. I have 2 bachelor's degrees, a master's degree, a teaching license for K-12 education, a state endorsement to teach English as a second language, and am fluent in Japanese and Spanish. I'm only saying this to show that I'm not nuts or mentally unbalanced. I also have a huge ministry on Facebook that you can get me with. I run a group of 4,000 members, 3 pages, one with 13,000 likes, another with 10,000. I only mention this not to brag, but to show I'm a good person with love, integrity, and of sound mind and body. I wish I knew what these things are. Here is a short narrative of the encounter on December 2nd, Monday, 2019. Grand Junction, Colorado. Our house is on the edge of a town in a semi-rural area known as Orchard Mesa. On its western side, it extends into the canyons, into the Colorado National Monument, which is similar to a small Grand Canyon. These canyons extend south into the La Salle mountain range by the border of Arizona, New Mexico, and Utah. On the eastern side, there are fields, farms, vineyards, pastures, and small hills which all connect to the bottom of the Grand Mesa, a 10,000-foot high mountain range, the largest mesa platform in the country, having alpine fields and hundreds of lakes. The Colorado River threads through Orchard Mesa, coming from the same direction of the Grand Mesa. The river in this section is heavily wooded on both sides, with deer, bears, skunk, raccoons, owls, eagles, rabbits frequenting the river, as well as fish. Mountain goats and lions are also in the area. We have a few apple trees in the garden section, and our neighbors also. There are grapes on vines, and we have a mulberry tree. This region is also known for its famous peaches and sweet corn. The farmlands by our house have multiple crops of all kinds imaginable, and even fields of lavender. Our house is on a half an acre of land and is enclosed with a high wooden fence. In the back section of the yard, in the back section of the yard, there a sectioned off old garden. Our neighbors only have a wire fence that our dogs would get through, so we keep it blocked off. There's a bigger, older shed the size of a garage closer to the house. It is connected to a smaller metal shed by a wooden gate. This 8-foot high shed has nothing next to it on all sides. The sheds block off the section with the old garden. No one has been back there in at least 2 years. Monday night, December 2nd. One of my dogs goes running out of the dog door barking. The other dog follows. They're barking like when people are walking behind the house by the canal and the small road there. But the barking is frantic and is focused on one area. I jump up out of bed, worried the dogs will be bitten by a rabid raccoon, and grab a flashlight, which I keep in a cupboard close by. I go out the door and down the 3 short cement stairs while shining the flashlight toward the dogs. They're barking at the bottom right side of the small shed where it's attached to a fence with the sectioned off garden area. Something is behind the shed. I don't want to go over and get them to drag them away, so I yell, "Come on, come here." They immediately turn and run toward me. Grateful I don't have to drag them back to the house. I know it can't be a bear since they just started hibernating in mid-November, and if it were, it would most likely run off or roar at them. A cat would have run off, and if it were the loose pit bulls that we have heard are jumping fences and getting cats, it would fight back. The dogs run up to me, and I open the door and hustle them in. I keep shining the light toward the area. This flashlight is so strong it literally lights up the entire backyard. It's a 1500 lumens light, and is light like daylight when you shine it. So you don't have to swing it around. You only need to hold it in one area, and the entire area for many feet on all sides is lit up like daylight. I step over a little closer in the direction of the small shed, being cautious not to go all the way over to where they were barking at something. I see someone moving behind the shed toward the back on the left, which is by my neighbor's wire fence. I think, crap, someone's back there. Who is it now? Why can I see them moving behind the shed so high up? There's nothing to stand on. Did my crazy neighbors build a platform back there and that they are standing on? There are people who break into houses in this area. It looks like they have a tannish looking coat on and they're sort of hunched over. What are they doing? This person is moving really slowly, like they are shuffling while looking down at the ground. I wonder why they are not reacting to the light. And this is all happening in a matter of seconds. Now they're moving from the left corner toward the right corner of the shed. But they are moving in a normal way. I think he meant they aren't moving in a normal way. They're gliding. It's not like when someone walks and you see their head go up and down, or an animal with walking motions. I wonder if it's a cat or a raccoon walking on top of the shed, that they must have jumped up there since there's nothing to stand on and it's made of metal, so they couldn't have clawed their way up. I step over a little closer in the direction of the small shed, being cautious not to go all the way over to where they were barking at something, and I see someone moving behind the shed toward the back on the left, which is by my neighbor's wire fence. I think, crap, someone's back there. Who is it now? Why can I see them moving behind the shed so high up? There's nothing to stand on. To my crazy neighbors, oh, hold on. Oh man, this email was saved in an incorrect way, where about 5 paragraphs exactly the same were saved in a row, I think. So I just skipped by them. I don't know how that happened, haven't a clue, but I'll carry on where I think it's going to make sense, which is right here. Sorry about that, you guys. It says, and I step back toward the door and into the house as fast as I can. I think frantically, should I wake John? What do I do? Oh my God, I don't know what to do. He won't believe me. I mean, he knows these things exist, but he won't believe me that it's here in our yard. Why? It's just too much of a coincidence. The only times I've had encounters were not visual, like the last one was in April, Easter weekend in Debecue Canyon. The next day I go out and take pictures behind the shed. There are parts on the grass that resemble giant footprints, but too much grass to be certain. It is evident something was walking around out there, but it could have been a bear It is evident something was walking around out there, but it could have been a bear or raccoon. As far as the Bigfoot the night before, it was behind the 8-foot-high shed, at least a foot above it. I took pictures to show the measurements of the shed and the footprint type marks, as well as the tamped down areas of the grass. There you go. That's the end of the email. That was a little awkward to read, and I don't know why, it's saved like 2 or 3 paragraphs in a row were saved and saved and saved and saved and saved. Very odd. But anyway, there you go. Grand Junction, Colorado. A little unnerving, to say the least, right? All right, here's one more, and then I'm going to get ripping. This one's titled, Story in Odell, Oregon, 15 miles from Mount Hood. Odell. Steve, thank you for what you're doing. I had an experience back in 2017 while visiting my parents' property up in Odell, Oregon near Mount Hood. My parents purchased some 30 acres of land back in 2003 from my father's uncle, who purchased it in the early 70s on a mountain and logged about 20 acres of it in 1978. It has not been logged since and has now been about 40 years. Everything there is wildly overgrown and it's remote on a ridge. I'll attach a picture. The 20 acres has a seasonal ravine going through the middle of it and is also fenced. A seasonal ravine, what's that? There is a small waterfall at the bottom of the property that is about 15 feet tall from the year-round drainage. The entire 20-acre area outside of the cherry orchard is fenced and is zoned timberland on a remote part of Gilhooly Road in Odell, Oregon. They have about 8.5 acres of cherries on the lower part of the parcel. No one has been back there since they purchased the property in 2003. I found out the property is splittable and was interested in putting a yurt back there or build a log home from the raw material at some point. So I opened up the gate and started walking back on an old logging trail left some 40 years ago. As I was about 30 feet into the trail, I heard a large noise due north of me on the edge of the hill. The noise sounded like branches breaking, cracking, for about 2 seconds, and I could see something move very quickly through the brush, headed west about 100 feet away from me. I could not get a good look at it. It scared the crap out of me, and I got out my phone and my gun. I always keep a pistol on me when going out to a remote area because we have coyotes, wolves, snakes, and mountain lions where I live in California. I videoed the general direction of where I saw the creature, and my first thought was it could be a bear or a mountain lion, but the other sounds I heard that are captured on video made me think otherwise. I've recorded video of a large, high-velocity whack and a second one with lower sound. You'll see me panning the phone camera to where I saw the object running through the brush until the 44-second mark, when I heard the noise. Nothing I have proves anything, but the sounds on the video may correlate with other information, including what sounds like bird calls very close. This property has never had any development, and besides some raccoons and beavers, I don't believe anything else lives there. Oh man, this email was saved in an incorrect way, where about 5 paragraphs exactly the same were saved in a row, I think. So I just skipped by them. I don't know how that happened, haven't a clue, but I'll carry on where I think it's going to make sense, which is right here. Sorry about that, you guys. It says, and I step back toward the door into the house as fast as I can. I think frantically, should I wake John? What do I do? Oh my God, I don't know what to do. He won't believe me. I mean, he knows these things exist, but he won't believe me that it's here in our yard. Why? It's just too much of a coincidence. The only times I've had encounters were not visual, like the last one was in April, Easter weekend in Debecue Canyon. The next day I go out and take pictures behind the shed. There are parts on the grass that resemble giant footprints, but too much grass to be certain. It is evident something was walking around out there, but it could have been a bear or raccoon. As far as the Bigfoot the night before, it was behind the 8-foot-high shed, at least a foot above it. I took pictures to show the measurements of the shed and the footprint-type marks, as well as the tamped-down areas of the grass. There you go. That's the end of the email. That was a little awkward to read, and I don't know why, it saved like 2 or 3 paragraphs in a row were saved and saved and saved and saved and saved. Very odd. But anyway, there you go. Grand Junction, Colorado. Huh. A little unnerving, to say the least, right? All right, here's one more, and then I'm going to get ripping. This one's titled Story in Odell, Oregon, 15 miles from Mount Hood. Odell. Steve, thank you for what you're doing. I had an experience back in 2017 while visiting my parents' property up in Odell, Oregon near Mount Hood. My parents purchased some 30 acres of land back in 2003 from my father's uncle, who purchased it in the early 70s on a mountain and logged about 20 acres of it in 1978. It has not been logged since and has now been about 40 years. Everything there is wildly overgrown and it's remote on a ridge. I'll attach a picture. The 20 acres has a seasonal ravine going through the middle of it and is also fenced. A seasonal ravine, what's that? There is a small waterfall at the bottom of the property that is about 15 feet tall from the year-round drainage. The entire 20-acre area outside of their cherry orchard is fenced and is zoned timberland on a remote part of Gilhooly Road in Odell, Oregon. They have about 8.5 acres of cherries on the lower part of the parcel. No one has been back there since they purchased the property in 2003. I found out the property is splittable and was interested in putting a yurt back there or build a log home from the raw material at some point. So I opened up the gate and started walking back on an old logging trail left some 40 years ago. As I was about 30 feet into the trail, I heard a large noise due north of me on the edge of the hill. The noise sounded like branches breaking, cracking, for about 2 seconds, and I could see something move very quickly through the brush, headed west about 100 feet away from me. I could not get a good look at it. It scared the crap out of me, and I got out my phone and my gun. I always keep a pistol on me when going out to a remote area because we have coyotes, wolves, snakes, and mountain lions where I live in California. I videoed the general direction of where I saw the creature, and my first thought was it could be a bear or a mountain lion, but the other sounds I heard that are captured on video made me think otherwise. I recorded video of a large, high-velocity whack and a second one with lower sound. You'll see me panning the phone camera to where I saw the object running through the brush until the 44-second mark, when I heard the noise. Nothing I have proves anything, but the sounds on the video may correlate with other information, including what sounds like bird calls very close. This property has never had any development, and besides some raccoons and beavers, I don't believe anything else lives there. Oh man, this email was saved in an incorrect way, where about 5 paragraphs exactly the same were saved in a row, I think. So I just skipped by them. I don't know how that happened, haven't a clue, but I'll carry on where I think it's going to make sense, which is right here. Sorry about that, you guys. It says, and I step back toward the door into the house as fast as I can. I think frantically, should I wake John? What do I do? Oh my God, I don't know what to do. He won't believe me. I mean, he knows these things exist, but he won't believe me that it's here in our yard. Why? It's just too much of a coincidence. The only times I've had encounters were not visual, like the last one was in April, Easter weekend in Debecue Canyon. The next day I go out and take pictures behind the shed. There are parts on the grass that resemble giant footprints, but too much grass to be certain. It is evident something was walking around out there, but it could have been a bear It is evident something was walking around out there, but it could have been a bear or raccoon. As far as the Bigfoot the night before, it was behind the 8-foot-high shed, at least a foot above it. I took pictures to show the measurements of the shed and the footprint-type marks, as well as the tamped-down areas of the grass. There you go. That's the end of the email. That was a little awkward to read, and I don't know why, it's saved like 2 or 3 paragraphs in a row were saved and saved and saved and saved and saved. Very odd. But anyway, there you go. Grand Junction, Colorado. A little unnerving, to say the least, right? All right, here's one more, and then I'm going to get ripping. This one's titled, Story in Odell, Oregon, 15 miles from Mount Hood. Odell. Steve, thank you for what you're doing. I had an experience back in 2017 while visiting my parents' property up in Odell, Oregon near Mount Hood. My parents purchased some 30 acres of land back in 2003 from my father's uncle, who purchased it in the early 70s on a mountain and logged about 20 acres of it in 1978. It has not been logged since and has now been about 40 years. Everything there is wildly overgrown and it's remote on a ridge. I'll attach a picture. The 20 acres has a seasonal ravine going through the middle of it and is also fenced. A seasonal ravine, what's that? There is a small waterfall at the bottom of the property that is about 15 feet tall from the year-round drainage. The entire 20-acre area outside of the cherry orchard is fenced and is zoned timberland on a remote part of Gilhooly Road in Odell, Oregon. They have about 8.5 acres of cherries on the lower part of the parcel. No one has been back there since they purchased the property in 2003. I found out the property is splittable and was interested in putting a yurt back there or build a log home from the raw material at some point. So I opened up the gate and started walking back on an old logging trail left some 40 years ago. As I was about 30 feet into the trail, I heard a large noise due north of me on the edge of the hill. The noise sounded like branches breaking, cracking, for about 2 seconds, and I could see something move very quickly through the brush, headed west about 100 feet away from me. I could not get a good look at it. It scared the crap out of me, and I got out my phone and my gun. I always keep a pistol on me when going out to a remote area because we have coyotes, wolves, snakes, and mountain lions where I live in California. I videoed the general direction of where I saw the creature, and my first thought was it could be a bear or a mountain lion, but the other sounds I heard that are captured on video made me think otherwise. I recorded video of a large, high-velocity whack and a second one with lower sound. You'll see me panning the phone camera to where I saw the object running through the brush until the 44-second mark, when I heard the noise. Nothing I have proves anything, but the sounds on the video may correlate with other information, including what sounds like bird calls very close. This property has never had any development, and besides some raccoons and beavers, I don't believe anything else lives there. This property has never had any development, and besides some raccoons and beavers, I don't believe anything else lives there. I told my wife the story, and she thinks I'm just paranoid. I know that whatever happened up there caused an adrenaline rush and panic like I have never felt. As you know, this area is one of the largest areas in the country with sightings near Mount Hood, Oregon. My parents say everyone they know in that area has stories, and now I do too. I am curious if it's similar to the sounds of wood hitting together on your experiences. I'd prefer you not use my name, as I have a business to run and I don't want any attention from anyone, including family. Alright, so the video's on YouTube. I will try to find it, and who knows if I'll see if I can record it on here, because I don't know how to download people's YouTube videos and take the content, alright? So I'm going to have to do that later on, but I will do that, and I'll tack it on here if I can successfully find it and share it. Okay, guys? There you go. Take from it what you will, or leave it, right? Back later.